and make a trick land if you kind of catch up to speed, but I want to make sure we're conscious of everyone's time. All right, to begin, so thank you all so much for coming out today. This is kind of that first kickoff meeting for the Dayton Comprehensive Plan. My name is Alec Horman, and with me is Sam Weiser. We are both from Taylor C. Williams Design Group. We're kind of a community planning, landscape architecture firm based out of Indianapolis and Louisville. We're quite familiar with Okra Plan, Central Indiana, Southern Indiana, kind of the needs of communities such as yours, because we're in it, we're doing this kind of stuff all the time. So we're excited to be out, kind of seeing what Dayton, kind of what's in your guys' future, kind of what are some of those opportunities and challenges we're going to look at today, and we're just really excited to kind of get started and kind of see where this all goes. So for today, some of the stuff that we're covering, we're going to do a little bit of introductions and roles, kind of get to know all of you and kind of get to know, what we're kind of all be working on kind of over the next couple months of this plan. We're also going to be going over kind of planning and process overview. So, why in the world are we doing this plan? Like, what's it going to involve? Like, how many steps? Like, what does Okra mean? Because we got that grant money for them, so, what's their piece in all of this? Then we're going to go into the plan organization. So we're kind of specific on what we need to have in there, but we can kind of make it look a little different for each community. But at the end of the day, what do we want to make sure that we have in there to abide by what the state and what Okra says? Then we're going to get into a little bit of existing conditions overview. So this is just some, a little bit of census stuff. So, what's kind of population looking like in Dayton? What kind of industries are people working in? What has been the growth of housing or declining housing, things like that. Some of that's going to be, you live here, so you might know, you might be able to see some of that every day, but maybe a thing or two might kind of jump out and surprise you. And then kind of the final thing we're going to get at, and I have big sticky notes and some handouts we'll get to, is some visioning exercises. So kind of this first meeting is to kind of give a little background on what the plan is and what you're all going to be doing to kind of help out over the next couple months. But it's also trying to get some of that initial feedback to kind of give us an idea of, okay, where's Dayton at right now? Where do we think, the next 10 years we want to be? What are some of those challenges we might need to overcome? What kind of development do we want to see in the future? What kind of, things do we support, like the school, and all kind of things around that. So for introductions and roles, you all sitting here are part of our planning committee. So the planning committee, you're going to be that group that, we have, I think, 2 other meetings past this, and you're going to kind of be that first line of us bringing information to you and getting feedback on. Or kind of what we're doing now, you're going to be that group that can sit and say, okay, well, living here for the past 20 years, I work here, and I kind of know the ins and outs of maybe what the town needs, what my neighbors have been saying that we need, and so I think I can be that person that can come out and try to give you all some information on that. So for your roles, we have these 4 scheduled meetings, and then 2 different public workshops. So we kind of want you all to attend all of these, kind of make your presence be known. That second thing is we kind of produce a document, as we kind of make those goals and objectives and the mapping and things like that. We're going to bring them back to you all and say, hey, kind of take a look of, we took what you said, we've kind of written it all down. Does this look right? Is this something that the right direction that we need to be going? Also, you kind of have that role of, engaging the public and the businesses and other organizations in town. So, I can sit and, send you things to put on the Time website or email blast for weeks, but, sometimes people just don't see that. So we kind of ask that the committees that role of talking to your neighbors about this. When they're sort of saying, oh, you know what, we have that public meeting coming up. It would be great if you could bring yourselves, your family, and all your other neighbors, so we have that big turnout, so we can get more and more feedback for the plan. And then kind of be a champion for the project. Throughout this process, it's kind of a little bit of a learning experience sometimes too, where not everyone knows what a comprehensive plan is. Not everyone kind of understands their purpose, or maybe they think, oh, that's just because you're telling me what I should do for zoning. Well, no, not really. It's part of that, but we kind of hope that as the committee goes out and this plan gets put out, you're kind of that champion where you're like, okay, well, we all sat down and kind of helped create this. The residents came in, you all helped create this, so kind of let's push forward the objectives and strategies, because that's what we think the town should be in the future.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we don't want this to be, oh, a firm from Indianapolis came, told us everything that we need to change and do, and then they left. Like, we want this to be a plan that is really a representation of the people who live and work here. So for that, we need your guys' voices to be able to push that forward, and also help us reach out to the people that may not come to meetings, how to get in contact with them, if that means, I need to call someone or I need to go to coffee with them and everything. Kind of help make those connections to the different aspects of the community that you guys are the community.
So for roles for staff and officials, Jim has that main point of contact or liaison to the town. Then also staff, that's kind of when we ask you, well, sometimes is there a past comprehensive plan? Or, is there kind of that, in this case, zoning documents, or, we were talking about like lift stations and things, is there that documentation that would be useful for us to know? So that's kind of one thing that we get from them. And kind of along the same lines, whether it be, we've had clerk treasurers, we've had this administrative assistants, we've had all sorts of people in the staff like look over the plan, read over it, kind of be those extra eyes and ears for, when we're kind of wrapping things up. So the consulting team, we're kind of that, we want to be that, as Sam said, that point of reference if, we go out today and then you might have a question like next week, like, oh man, I wish I could have said this to him at the meeting and it just came in my head. We want to be that group that, you can reach out whenever you need to. We have our emails, you can send things to Jen, you can give to us anyway, so we kind of want to be that group that not only is here to, we're going to be kind of doing the back research, we're going to be kind of running some meetings, kind of writing the plan itself, but, as we're going through and doing that vision and goals and objectives and developing all the elements within this plan, we want to make sure that, like Sam said, it's not just us sitting back in an office writing it, it's, you guys have input for it, we kind of want to be there to always be able to communicate with that. So for planning process and overview, so this is where I said it kind of gets a little tricky once we get into open things, but at the very base, a comprehensive plan kind of has to have, three big things. You got to have a statement of goals and objectives for the future of development. So whether that be, we want to have housing in the future, or, we want to be able to have a Burger King come in downtown, because that's really what people want. And then we have to, on top of that, have kind of a policy for land use development. So at our next meeting, we'll kind of work on crafting something similar to what a zoning map would be, but a future land use map. One of these maps is not saying what the zoning is going to be in the future. It's not saying you have to put housing here if we say. You don't have to put industrial here if it says that. It's just kind of a guiding document for town council to go back and say, okay, well, someone's come in with us, they have a zoning change request. We can say yay or nay kind of based on what we all went through as a group and what's kind of our vision for the future. And then you also kind of have statements for policy on, public ways, public spaces, whether it be parks, whether it be the roads, your utilities, any kind of structure, like town hall itself. If you want to come in next year and do a big renovation, that's something that we'll put in here as well. So on top of those kind of base things that the state just says you kind of need for one of these plans, Oprah, who you have the grant through, kind of comes in and says, all right, well, you got to have a whole bunch of other stuff in here too, because we want to see that these smaller towns are kind of getting everything under this umbrella. So there's 13 different things. We can kind of go through them later on too, but everything from land use, public facilities, placemaking, economic development, housing, even things like broadband and hazard mitigation. These are just kind of those big topics that it doesn't matter if we just have one small little action for one of those. It doesn't matter if we have 20 for one of those. They just want to see that we kind of sat down as a group and as a town and kind of went through and kind of checked what we needed for each of these and kind of ranked for their importance. So making sure that they're all still in there.
Yeah, and those are the legal requirements for it. That's the state Indiana codes. That means, if you want to get the funding from OCRA stands for the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. So that's what the funding to do this comprehensive plan is through. Their checklist, they'll go through and, if you just leave out broadband access completely and everything, well,
they will let you know in not so friendly terms if you left something out.
Yes. normally they're quite friendly people, but when you just leave out a chunk and everything, you're like, well, let's try again. So that's all things there, we go through the visioning that doesn't necessarily fit in one of those 13. That doesn't mean we can't ourselves put it into the comprehensive plan. That's just what Okra, at a minimum, wants something to look at.
So kind of along those lines, we want to kind of touch on, what is planning. So this is one of kind of those pie in the sky ideas that, sometimes I say someone says, oh, my old school makes something, oh, I do community planning. They're like, well, what the heck is that? Like, I have no idea. So kind of at its base, what we're trying to do is kind of that collaborative process for defining Dayton's future. Whether that be what we want to see for development-wise in the next 10 years, what kind of new programs or festivals, or, how do we want our utilities to grow, or how do we want our land to be used in the future. So kind of all those ideas are what we're looking at when we're doing these planning processes. Not only that, but they're based on your all's values. So like we kind of wanted to reiterate, it's not just me sitting there writing what I think you need. This plan is based on what the community wants and community values. Kind of the goal that we're trying to answer when we're going through all these steering committee meetings to the public meetings is kind of 4 good questions on where's Dayton at today, where do we want to head, why do we want to get there, and then how will we get there. So if I do want to see Burger King go in here on the corner, okay, well, we kind of articulated that we want that. Well, how are we going to get there? So what are kind of those steps that we're going to go through, whether it be reaching out to people or whether it's working with other business owners to see if they can kind of fill that need. So that's all stuff that as we go through this process, we try to break down to make sure that you will have a kind of clear guide map on those next future years. Inside these elements of plan, we kind of covered earlier for with Okra, but kind of at the end, we're kind of taking inventory of the community's conditions. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing a little later on tonight. That's when Sam and I are sitting down and reading through layers and layers of numbers on population or median incomes and things like that. Those are kind of that base level that is going to go into this plan, and then kind of building on top of that, we start getting into that envisioning that we're going to start talking about. We want to create that framework for the town's growth where it's not just, well, we think that down the street we need a new hardware store, but we don't really know why. We're kind of getting away from that, kind of creating a document that has that framework that kind of explains, okay, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is why we want that.
It's a twofold thing. We want it to be a data-driven decision, but we also want it to be a community-driven decision. So if someone comes to me and be like, well, why do we need all this new housing? Well, you have a population growing. People need places to live. Or vice versa, you have a declining population, so you may have empty housing. So we're just trying to take the different numbers and apply it to what then we're physically hearing from people and bringing those together to equal our goals and strategies of where we want Dayton to go. So kind of blending two different aspects of it.
Yep. So kind of at the end of that, we want to kind of definitely read some of these things because I know that, especially on the zoning thing, people kind of hear that word and get a little scared sometimes in communities. But at the end of the day, comprehensive plan it's a legislative document. It kind of has the ideas where the town's going to go through. It kind of has that backing for making those decisions in the future on where funding might happen or zoning changes might occur or what development we want. It's an official policy statement for private development projects and community expenditures. If, at the end of this process it comes out that town really wants a 50-acre park somewhere, then we can kind of explain that expenditure down the road because, well, it says here this is what the community wants. And we've kind of established this, and this is what the direction we're going to take. It has that vision for the future. We'll have a big vision statement, those overarching goals to kind of get at, everything that we need to see. And then it's the foundation for land use decisions. So when someone does come to council and says, hey, I want to make my property across here, B2 actually, this kind of gives you well, we're not going to do that because of what we say in this plan, so it's not just, we're saying that just to say it. Now, what a comprehensive plan is not is a legally binding and enforceable document. So this is a plan at the end of the day is not something that is set in stone. You don't have to follow it 100% of the time. If 5 years down the road a big major change happens in the town, it's okay to kind of stray away and go back and kind of revise and make sure the vision in there is on track. So it's not something that you say you need to put in that Burger King, well, you don't actually have to if something down the road kind of changes. It's not a solution for all of our problems. When we come in, what we can hear from you all, what we hear from the public, kind of what we see on, data-driven things. At the end of the day, we can't hit every single issue that might arise in the next 20 years. So that's kind of why, these plans are meant to be a little fluid. It is meant to say, okay, 5 years has gone by, let's kind of take a look at what we've done, maybe what needs updated to make sure that all those strategies are still kind of what the community wants. It's not a rezoning of any property. When we sit down and do the land use map, we start putting yellows and reds and purples down on top of the town, and sometimes people come in and they'll be like, oh, well, why in the world is my house red all of a sudden? Well, it's not going to be red. It's not going to be business. It's just, 20 years down the road, if things happen to change, that might be a good place for us to put a business or keep for that zone eventually. And it's not, a singular route that you have to take. So kind of like I said, if there's a lot of different ways to get to, your end goal at the end of the day. And if some of these strategies in here in 10 years kind of aren't what they need to be, then it's perfectly fine to kind of go in and change them or even take them out if that's the right route to take. So for our planning process, and what we're going to kind of be doing over these next 5 months now, because of Boca's timeline, we kind of break things down into 3 phases. So we have kind of a phase 1, which is existing conditions, a phase 2, which is kind of the plans development, and then the third phase, which is, kind of developing the implementation strategies and then adoption. So kind of for that phase 1, I'm going to read things here, that's going to be where we kind of look at, our demographic analysis. We're going to kind of look at, what incomes are, where people are working, what kind of industries are around here. We want to try to look at population projections, kind of all that, base data kind of builds some more ideas on. Kind of at the end of that, we're going to have our first plan commission meeting. We can get into some key person interviews and focus groups. So, if there's some people that aren't in the committee or some business owners out there or other residents that, you're like, oh man, they may not be in the committee, but boy, do they know a lot about what our business needs for Dayton, or boy, do they know a lot about like housing development. That's kind of our time, like I said earlier, we actually can come in, sit down with these groups of people and get even more kind of in-depth information from them. So we can really make sure that, the ideas that we're bringing back to you kind of fit with the community needs. And then kind of at the end of this kind of first phase is when we'll have our first big public open house and then an online survey. So we'll kind of work out the details and maybe what that public meeting will look like. But that's usually a case of where we invite everyone in the town, people from outside the town, if you work here, family, friends, kind of everyone comes up, and then it's a chance for anyone and everyone to give feedback. It can be on, the big ideas they want. If they want to see a splash pad somewhere, if they really want, that fast food restaurant down the street. It's kind of an idea for people to come in and say, I'm stuck on fast food. I'm hungry.
Can you tell me I haven't had lunch?
Burger King.
It's Burger King, Wendy's, whatever it might be, Wendy's fans. But it's kind of that chance for everyone in the community to come in, they can give their input, so it's not just maybe they're thinking, well, there's this select group of people working on this plan, and we're not going to get a chance to say anything. No, this is a chance for everyone to come in, they can talk to us, and then if they aren't able to, we like to do that online survey because sometimes it's easier if you just go in and spend 10, 15 minutes clicking on what you think, getting a little bit of feedback from your living room when you're watching a football game at home. Sometimes that's a little easier. We like to give that option for people as well. And that second phase is where we're going to take all that information we get from that first, from all those existing conditions, what we hear from you all, and we start building those vision goals and objectives. So that's when we'll start looking at, the housing element, and we'll say, okay, well, is there a housing need? What type of housing do we actually need? Where's it going to go? What should the price points be? So we'll start kind of looking at all those different topics and kind of whittling down, all right, what are some strategies, what could they be, what should some of our goals be? And then that's also when we'll kind of get into that future land use plan, kind of utilities mapping, we'll kind of look at all kind of existing future mapping in there. And then for engagement, that's kind of the working time, so we'll kind of have working sessions with you all. We'll kind of have 2 more steering committee meetings where we'll come in, we'll kind of present some stuff that we've talked about. We'll kind of get feedback from you all to make sure we're on the right track. And then kind of once we start wrapping all that up, we'll get to that third phase where we've come in, we have, our 13 goals, we have a bunch of strategies under there. Well, now it's actually time to figure out how we're going to get it done. So that final phase is where we kind of sit down and we look at all funding options in the state that are available. We look at partnerships within the town, outside the town. It could be Subaru plant, it could be, local businesses down here. Who can kind of partner to lead some of these projects that we've talked about. And then we'll get to the actual adoption process. So since we're area plan, we'll sit down, it'll be for the town council, and then we'll actually be area plan commission as well. We'll look at it. And it can all, it can't all be done in one sitting because you just need one reading for it. Since we're separate entities, we'll work that out when we get there. But so for that final one, we'll also have another public open house because we'll be able to go to the public and say, hey, we got your feedback, we got all your guys' big ideas. Here's kind of what we've created for all these strategies and goals for the future. This is what we've worked with the steering committee on. And that gives them an opportunity to come and say, okay, well, that's a good idea, but I think it's less important than this one. So we can start kind of getting some priorities and see when things need to be done, kind of set some schedules for, well, maybe this should be done in 5 years. This one should be done like tomorrow. Like we need to start on this one right away. And then we'll have a final kind of plan committee meeting, go over the final plan. We'll have you all sit down, kind of read it, give comments and feedback of all sorts and kinds. You don't have to be kind about it.
Tear it apart.
You can tear it apart. And then, like I said, we'll kind of have those final meetings and kind of wrap everything up and send it off to Okra. So between kind of that fourth meeting and the plan commission hearing, we like to give a 2-month period for Okra to review things. The last plan I did, it was almost 4 months, and I didn't hear anything back from them. Sometimes it's like 2 weeks. So we like to give a little bit of leeway so they can actually, read things and get feedback to us. But for us, we never really have a lot of feedback from our firm. They're usually pretty good the first time, so we'll put a little brag in there. All right, so kind of any questions on our process? So we can run through a little quick, but I want to make sure we can have time to kind of chat as a group later on meetings or, what we're going to be doing, what your all's goals all are. Quiet. So I'm going to get into, like I said, like a little bit of existing conditions. So some of this might, I've lived here forever. I can got to see this happening from 2010s now, but this kind of gives us a little bit of a background on the town, just so we know coming in, like, okay, well, housing's gone up, population's maybe changed a little bit since then, just so we have a little bit of an idea of maybe what some of those challenges or opportunities might be when we're talking about later. So for population, change. So since 2010, Dayton has gone down about 6% population, which, is a decline, but, it's nothing really crazy compared to some of the other small communities that I've seen around the city. Some of the comparison communities that I'm using, we like to, in the plan, not just say, okay, here's what Dayton's doing, like, so what, oh well. We like to try to compare them against maybe similar sized communities in the region, in the greater state. So I think for this one, I really tried finding, you might probably recognize a lot of them, Gattaca, Daleville, Delphi around here. Because these are all, I felt like, communities that are about the same size in population. Maybe some of them are right on the edge of larger communities, so kind of like a Dayton Lafayette. So like Bristol, for example, Bristol is about a 5-minute drive from like Elkhart. So, kind of a big employment hub, a lot of people coming in and out. I go get my groceries there, probably similar to maybe what's kind of in town here that people need to go off to Lafayette to get things done. So that's kind of the idea behind these communities is not just saying, oh, Dayton's gone down in population, but, kind of what are other communities of the same size doing? And then we can kind of sit back and say, okay, well, why has this borough gone up by 25% since 2010? Like, what are they doing? Did they just annex a bunch of people? Like, what was going on there? But in total, for this is the actual census that we did a few years ago, it was at 1330 for a population within Dayton.
And this is the U.S. Census,
yeah.
not we did.
Yeah, I didn't do it myself. I wasn't around here counting, but yeah. So this is the U.S. Census. All this stuff comes from those census numbers. If we do have cases, especially public meetings, some people will really get stuck on one number sometimes and say, "Well, where did you find this?" I'm like, Well, because we did a census about it, so I'm not just kind of making these numbers up out of thin air. However, I will say, even though since 2010 that kind of under 6%, since 2000 the town has grown, I think, by almost 17%. So there's been a little bit of decline in these last 10 years, but overall, as a community, I think there has been growth that we've seen, and I think we can kind of expect that into the future too. So for age structure, so this is something kind of fun to look at when you're thinking about, okay, well, who's actually living here? So between the ages of 0 and 19, that makes up about 27% of Dayton's population. So either elementary, high school, or maybe early on college students. So it's a fairly large group of your population. Kind of that next largest group would be, I'll say, middle-aged, young working adults. Older millennials, thank you. 30 to 39. So we really like to see those numbers because that means you have like a pretty young workforce still. So that means you still have maybe some young families moving in. They're out of college, came here to live, they just bought their first house, they're kind of starting a family. So we really like to see numbers like that because that kind of goes into that growing population later on. And for over ages 65, about that 16%, I'll say that's maybe a little lower than other communities around the state that we've been in recently. One of the reasons we like to look at that is because, if I'm getting ready to retire, I've lived in Dayton all my life, and I just can't take care of my house anymore, what am I going to do? That's kind of an indicator for us, well, is there senior living in the area? Lafayette's kind of next door, so that might be a little easier, but some of these towns where the next biggest cities, 45 minutes away, what kind of can we do and start planning for that?
That information is from the census?
Yep. So this is as well. Racial breakdown is another thing we can look at just for maybe some community facilities or programs in larger towns. For the most part, Dayton is, mainly Caucasian, or a little much more race. So this is one of those we look at for in some communities where there's a large Hispanic population, or there is a large African American population, or some other. That's where we can start talking about in those places like, okay, well, do we need to provide community amenities for these ethnic types? Is there something else that from a community we can do, or from like the government we can do to kind of help them? For housing type, Dayton is very much predominantly kind of that single unit home. So you have your little house and your 1 acre of land, or all these out here for the most part are probably those single units. So when we're looking at this, it's not only okay, well, is this just the popular one because we have a lot of suburbs, or then we start thinking, okay, well, we have all these school-age children, I might not be able to buy a home right out of high school when I start working that first job. So, do I need to start looking in more duplexes, or, you have 6-ish% of, I'll say, apartments for multi-unit. So, maybe we need to start looking at, is there a place where we can put kind of more multi-unit housing for kind of these young families, high schoolers, fresh college people who might not be able to buy, or maybe they don't want to buy yet. And then for housing occupancy, kind of along the same lines as you have, a lot of those is single-family homes. A lot of the homes in Dayton are also owner-occupied. So I think this kind of makes sense with that less kind of multi-family housing idea that, if you have less apartments, you're probably going to have more people who live and own in their homes. So along that, in this, I'll say these vacancy is a little off for census because it's like self-reported at times, so maybe it's higher or lower. But very low vacancy, I'll say for the town, especially compared to like Bristol or Attica, where they're like double what some of those towns are. So maybe that is an indication that we're looking at. Okay, well, Dayton has a pretty low vacancy rate. We have a fairly high owner-occupied, so does that mean that we need to start kind of building more of those single-family homes? We need to bring in some more duplexes because, low vacancy rate's always good, but, if I'm kind of go from, a smaller house and go to a larger house in the town and there's just nothing available, like, kind of what do we start thinking about to try to fix that? Home values. So home values have been rising since 2010. Dayton's right now, median home value, when the census came out, was about $131,000. And I will say, I think there was it kind of breaks it down farther to like highs and lows, but I think when I first see that, I think Dayton's affordable. So Dayton is a place that, if I am, right out of college or working my first job, it's not going to break my bank if I want to buy a home. Like, it's definitely easy for young families to come in. I think, you see like Pittsboro or Bristol or even typically New County a little higher. I think part of that also is because you'll have a lot of older homes that might be outside here coming up, but a lot of older, historic, and so at times while, property values right now, they might not be the same as they were 5 to 6 years ago. But I think that kind of plays a part in that as well. But I think key thing here, that's almost a 40% raise since 2010, so definitely above the trend, I'll say, and I think it's going to continue trending up. The education level. So this is one of those that we look at because sometimes it's nice to know for, if we want to talk about economic development, we want to talk about what kind of businesses or employment opportunities. Usually the first thing we want to look at is, well, what is the education level here? Do we have a lot of people with, bachelors? Do we have a lot of people that are just out of high school? So Dayton, I believe, is a little higher than a lot of other communities. There's been a big jump, I think, in college attainment over the last 10 years. Even, I'll say this, the green color that's in here, the people with associate's degrees went up by nearly 10%. That's a very large jump. So either that's, an indication that we see that kind of 30 to 40-year-old group that's coming in, so maybe they're coming out of school or kind of going back and getting that, college education. So that's something that we always like to see because that means we can start thinking about, okay, well, you have college-educated people. Does that mean that we can start bringing in different kinds of employment opportunities? Does that mean that maybe these people are going to go off and get, higher-paying jobs so they're living here? So we can think about, like, larger housing or amenities. So it's just something that we'd like to look at and kind of have in the backs of our mind. For household income, another pretty large increase compared to some of the other communities that we're kind of looking at. Currently on the census, the median household income is $61,000. So that is a combination of everyone living under the roof. So mom, dad, grandma's living there. That's kind of anyone and everyone. The percentage was, I think, about 20%. I remember off the top of my head. So, but like I said, I think the town is definitely outpacing the state. You're outpacing typically New County, like with the size of Pittsburgh, there's kind of a weird group over there. I'd say you're kind of doing better than everyone else that we were looking at. So maybe that goes along with that higher education that we've seen. Maybe that's just because people are starting to move here with those, both parents working and trying to start a family and go to school. But definitely something that we want to see. For industry breakdown, this is how people have reported what types of jobs they're working in. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, I'm working in manufacturing in Dayton, but this is kind of those industry groups that, where are kind of the residents working in. So kind of the top ones that were reported for this were manufacturing, which is pretty typical for Indiana, the educational, healthcare, social assistance, so either working in local elementary, working in local hospitals, pretty common for towns as well. And then retail trade was kind of the third highest, about 13% of the population are employed in some type of retail trade. So we'll kind of have a full report that we'll write up and we can send out to you all afterwards. It kind of gets into, we'll look at, 26% of people are working in manufacturing, but they're not working here, so where are they working? So we'll kind of get into, how much of the residents are commuting somewhere for work, or, we'll kind of break it down for, okay, we have our population in 2020, what's it looking like for 2040, and we'll kind of work on that these next couple of weeks and get that over to you, and so you can also post it out as well if everyone else in the town kind of wants to look at the existing conditions. But at the end of the day, I think kind of some of these key takeaways I've mentioned are, there might have been a recent decline in population, but the town has grown by over 200 people since the year 2000. So the little minor setback is still kind of trending upwards. Along with that, the town's median age has raised a little bit since then, but like you saw, there's still a big group of, students and young adults that live in Dayton. On top of that, we've had some of the highest increases in home values over the last 10 years. Whether that's because things have been crazy recently, but because people have just, started coming here to live here, and we've had a lot of new homes going in, a lot of new subdivisions, so maybe that could be part of there. We talked about, the majority of owner occupied, so is there a need for more rental units? Is there a need for it? We're trying to keep, those 19-year-olds in town, like we need to put in units that I can rent, so I don't have to buy them all by myself. And then the final, like I brought up, the well-educated, maybe bachelor's or some of those like master's professional degrees are slightly behind. I think the amount of associate's degrees and the increases that the town's seeing far exceeds a lot of these other communities that we've looked at for this. Anything kind of standing out there on this? I know that stats are kind of those things that you're like, oh, a bunch of numbers on the screen sometimes. So anything kind of standing out? Is it shock? Is it surprise? Anything seem
The population,
off?
I'm shocked.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You think it's...
I thought it went way up.
I thought our population was about 1,550 to 1,600, and it actually gone up, and then the houses, I think it used to be about 523, and now it's about 535. But of the houses, there's 171 houses or so that are rentals, landlord owned.
Oh, really?
I counted them when I was working on
Yeah,
Well, this
it's
is the good
such-
stuff to
it.
know.
We can go through that whole
Yeah.
list and actually get you, but I think one of every 3 houses is
And that's the caveat when it comes to looking at these numbers. So the census is a self-reported thing. So if you have a population of 1,000 people, but only 600 of them actually
Yeah.
do the census,
Well, should.
yeah, everybody should do the census for reasons like this. But so these numbers are just like your base starting. If we come and look and we have the whole receipts of the entire housing inventory, and we see like it's kind of like fact checked. It's like, okay, well the census says this, however, my binder of numbers that I have from the town says a different number. We're gonna go with the binder from the town and everything. So this is just kind of like a base start to get an idea of initially, but again, it's solely based off of who actually did the census, and also it goes with like the taxes as well, reported taxes, all numbers taken from the state and the federal government. So it's like it's a little like caveat and everything, as well as these are 2020 numbers. So if you had a boom this year, you could have had like 500 people move in. It's not going to be reported in 2020 because it happened 2 months ago, right? Everything. So that's why we always want to have the data, but then vet it through the community and also to the public, because you guys see that, oh no, that number's wrong. Like we need to look into that. So then we'll go back and do the deeper
through
dive.
the office. We can get you exact duplexes,
Yeah, that'd be great.
exact single
Mm-hmm.
family owned houses or landlord owned or whatever.
We've gone through a lot of like building permit days in our days. For good or for worse. All right, any other kind of things sticking out to anyone, or any questions on that at all?
Did you do plans for any of those other towns that you have listed up there?
We actually just got turned down for Delphi one recently.
Oh, thanks.
I know. We might have actually done Mulberry stuff. We might have done stuff in Mulberry.
We did Mulberry, but that was about 10 years ago.
So time to
10,
start
oh gosh,
right
that's
now.
10, 2012.
We're currently working in Daleville, or going to start working in Daleville because they're redoing their whole zoning ordinance. So we're kind of starting from the base. So we're working there. We've done some work up in Elkhart near Bristol, both for comp planning and kind of like more so like trail design, I think, up there as well. And then one that is not on here, but we actually just finished Otterben. They just got theirs adopted last year, I think, for Otterben.
It's less than that.
Did they take that long?
Yeah. it did.
Well, Otterben was I'll say, fun situation because they're like split right down the middle for counties.
Yes.
And kind of their whole thing was, we want our own plan commission because we're tired of being pulled one way to canoe and kind of the other way. So since their plan was created, actually, it was finished we finished it about a year or so ago.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
finished our part. It was through the state,
Yeah.
the layout.
But they've already gone in and sat down with the plan, and they've already made their own plan commission. They've already sent out all the documents for that. They're in the process of making their own zoning ordinance, and I think working on one or two other items in there as well. So I think it's a nice example because, you know, sometimes people might think of these plans as, well, it's going to sit on the shelf for a little bit, and if it comes up, it comes up. Well, when you have people that, you know, are moving and are trying to get things done, then, I mean, they've already crossed off a bunch off the list, their main things, less than a year.
Actually, they did scrap all that.
Did they scrap all
They asked
that?
to join the plan.
Oh, what? What the heck? What's the whole point of us writing that plan?
I know.
Oh.
So they decided to go with Tippecanoe then?
Yeah,
That was a very spicy topic.
That was
at all of
a-
our meetings.
Unbelievable.
sorry.
I'll never talk about that again.
So I'm curious, why was it a spicy topic?
It was just different opinions based off of kind of the values of the different committees. One committee was very development driven. They wanted lots of new things happening. Whereas the other committee was more of a, we like how it is, we want to like maintain where we are, and just kind of just make sure that we're like slowly progressing instead of just booming progressing. So when it came to like prioritizing different things, it had a little scratchiness sometimes. But
There were some interesting things for Otterben. One community member actually suggested putting a bypass around Otterben for truck traffic, I suppose, because there's a big need for that in a town of like 1,200. So.
is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, we're like, all right, well, I guess if that's what you really want, we'll write it down. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but so yeah, but other communities, so like Tell City to the south in southern Indiana, we just finished up their Oka project, and they're a little larger, like 8,000 or so, but they were already starting to do things before we even finished the plan. They just had a mayor that is like, get up and go, like he just wants to get stuff done. Like money's out there to get it right now, so kind of his idea was, if we get these dollars in, like let's get them all like my we can.
yeah, and comprehensive plans can also be used for various funding as well. It's proof that like, look, we have this vision, we have a plan, we just need the funding for it, and then whatever that entity be a community foundation, could be the state. They read it and see like, okay, you know, like this is what the community wants. This is like you guys have a plan. You know the different steps that it's going to take to accomplish this. We get that you just need the funding aspect of it.
You say you need a $28,000 gazebo as a grant, like as long as it's in there, we'll try to get it.
28.
All right, so kind of the rest of our time, we want to sit down and kind of do some visioning exercises. So we're putting everyone to work for a little bit. Kind of purpose, like we've kind of talked about, is trying to get some of that initial feedback from you all. Kind of some of those big ideas, you know, what you think the
You guys are welcome to come to the table for this session.
challenges are facing the town in the future, what are some of those opportunities that we have. So for this first one, exercise one, you can have a little sheet of paper in front of you, and kind of idea behind this is we kind of briefly talked about those 13 over topics, from broadband, land use to housing and more. So what we want you to do is take a little bit of time and first kind of choose, you know, what in the future or what in these next couple of years you think are going to be the big three things that Dayton needs to focus on. Whether it be because either there's a big opportunity to capitalize on, you know, land development somewhere, or because, man, we just really need better broadband around here. So I think that's got to be the first big thing we try to do. So we kind of want you all to take a couple minutes and just first, whatever those big three are that you think, kind of write them on those topic lines. And then once you kind of have them written down, maybe fill in, you know, for broadband, is it a challenge because we just don't have the funding for it? Is it a challenge because, you know, there's just not enough people here for, you know, larger groups to come in and kind of put that infrastructure in? Or, you know, on the housing side, is it a challenge because, you know, we have some areas for land, but we just really can't get utilities out there to serve them? So kind of any and all ideas, and this could be, it doesn't have to be what you think like the town as a whole needs sometimes. Maybe it's just my personal opinion on what I think the town needs coming up. If you got questions, you can shoot questions. Yep, I'll walk around and I'll play the teacher.
What is placemaking?
Ooh, great question. So placemaking, It can be a lot of things. Kind of the idea behind placemaking is,
I see what you're saying.
You
So
can take it
placemaking is
over.
about like your character and identity in the community. So we, we said, distinctly Dayton. Like when someone asks you, what are you doing in Dayton? Why should I live in Dayton? It's the first thing that people think of. It could be, oh, your cute little downtown, or it could be your community events that are going on, a festival that goes on, banners along the street, different. We talked earlier. The town hall is going to get a little facelift on the front to get new pavers and bricks and everything. That's the kind of placemaking thing. You're trying to make your physical space something to really embody the identity of that community. So it could be a small little like farmer's market. That could be something to just like activate a space, or it could be a community event like a neighborhood cleanup day, something like that. It's just the actual people themselves. Why do I want to stay here? I don't want to live here.
good question. That one is for us like, oh, placemaker. I totally know what that is, but
It's more of like an ambiguous thing, where I know utilities, that's going to be sewer, water, things like that. It's more cut and dry. Some of my favorite projects are this. It's the fun ones.
everyone likes sewer lift stations.
Yeah, so everybody wants to talk about a
Very
new like
glamorous.
sewage capacity and everything like that. Yes. Some communities though, that is what they're most excited about, is their new like treatment plan, and everybody's raving about it. I'm like, okay, like, yes, that's what we want to focus on. And it doesn't have to necessarily always be challenges. If there's opportunities, like, for example, if you know of an area that you think has some empty land that you think, oh, this would be a great place for a park. Or if there's a new business that you think might be, good, like if we're missing like a grocery store or anything, like that's an opportunity of something that we can bring into town. Or if you've been somewhere that you think, oh, I loved this aspect of this town. It would be great if we brought it into Dayton. Those are also things that we really want to try to capture. Yeah, and as Alec mentioned, I will be open for this whole entire process. If you think of something later tonight, if you think of something tomorrow, you can email and call us, and we are at your beck and call for any sort of conversation. Because I know someone asks me to put it on the spot, I'll think of something very surface level, and once I leave that meeting, about 2 hours later, it will spark and be like, oh, I should have said that. We are open to all forms of communication. And also, all feedback is anonymous as well, unless you yourself say it out loud, which tonight I am going to force you to say it out loud. But in other cases, like any sort of like form of communication, if that's something you want to stay anonymous, is your right to it.
Public meetings and everything, it's all sticky notes on boards. Sometimes people know who writes things down.
But tonight I'll be writing things,
Yeah.
so you get to look at my handwriting, not his chicken scratch.
Doctor handwriting.
Jeopardy music or something?
I got Spotify on there. Do you have a timeline when they're gonna finish construction out here finally? No. Whenever they say it's.
Oh, I didn't know you were serious.
November?
November, they've been saying.
I'm just gonna hold you to it now. He said it, I didn't say it.
Sounds good to me. It almost looks like they're just about ready to pour the west town line.
Well-
Looking towards getting ready there.
I feel like they keep pushing back the date for the north split in Indy right now, like 65 and all that.
What is it now?
Technically, end of the year for just the
Yeah.
roads.
But it was just, there were certain aspects that were supposed to be open at the end of July, and they're nowhere near ready to be open, so it's one of those, there's been a couple months, not necessarily like July 12th or anything, but like, oh yeah, July 2020, and then July 2020 has come and passed.
How long has that been closed?
Like
A year and a half now, yeah.
Well, it sucks if we live right there too.
Yes,
So like,
of course.
if I'm trying to get south, that's great. I can hop down, get on north. I got to go through all the lonely downtown traffic.
But our firm is also a part of that project, so we can't like.
Well,
totally-
not part of the road stuff.
No, not part of it, so, but,
Pretty fancy around it.
and the plazas,
Because you need plazas for
please thank you.
states. Another 2 or 3 minutes and we'll start chatting.
And again, all the topics will be included within the plan. We're just trying to get just like a base initial kind of feeler of what some priorities or areas of focus should be.
Unless you have a lot of archaeological findings around here, that's probably not going to be a big one. I have a suspicion.
But if you do, this is the time to
Yeah.
tell us.
That's cemetery action.
No horror movies, please. Friendly, happy sunshine.
Okay. About done. We can, you more than welcome to keep writing, but let's go ahead. Time to go on. So, have all of our stuff written down here. I'm going to go around the room and maybe. Sorry from the far side. Where's it over there? And maybe just tell us like maybe your top 1 or your top 2 on there that you think are, going forward. These are the topics that I think we really need to focus on. Then we'll kind of write them down, which we got, and then we'll kind of all brainstorm here afterwards with some of the other ideas you've written down for the big ideas and stuff. So, picking on you in the back, we're ready to go.
Okay, well, my top 3,
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with 3. Historic and archaeological.
Looks like I ate my words.
Because Dayton's bicentennial is 2027,
Oh.
and maybe that could be part of the
Mhm.
focus of this whole process, so we can have an appreciation and celebration of our early
Yeah.
settlers.
Yeah.
Parks and recreations, like trails and areas for bikes and golf carts, joggers, places for joggers and runners. We don't have a community park outside of the playground at the school and
Okay.
maybe a playground over at the church that some people utilize, but it'd be nice to have a community park with like a splash pad and things for area residents. And then my real number one priority would be the placemaking.
Yep.
Or branding, as you've called it before. Our signs are outdated. We should have signs on all entrances to the town. And we need to upgrade our public perception of the town, inside and outside of Dayton. We need community building ideas and activities, and actually Jen has really kind of rocked that process. She's really getting the ball rolling on some things like that, and this has been such a fun year for the town. And but doing things like that, I think, is important to really build the community identity.
Perfect.
And it'd be nice, you talked about what they're doing with the sidewalk out front, and they're also talking about street lights, like old-fashioned street lights down 38 for the next block or so, to have a kind of a town green around the gazebo. You know, an area where people can,
So you can actually have lights to go out there
yeah,
past 7 o'clock.
right, exactly. And Wi-Fi is nice.
That's actually something for the Tell City I mentioned. They're putting Wi-Fi to their, they have actually 7 city parks. It's kind of crazy. But to their 3 largest, they're putting public Wi-Fi in for all of them. They kind of partnered with the service provider down there, so I think they're trying that up right now too.
I know Jen's been working on that, but we don't have fiber in town hall yet, and so she can't do anything about that until we get fiber here.
Well, awesome. Perfect. Move down. Sarah, I'll pick on.
No comment.
No comments? All right.
He was writing away.
I know.
Actually, mine is pretty much along the same lines as
Okay.
Cindy.
Yep.
So, the placemaking, make Dayton great again, because there is a lot of people in this town that's passionate about this community, whether for or against certain things. Parks and recreations, the challenges would be space and the budget and the manning. The opportunities, great attraction for young families, community pride involvement.
Yep.
And my number one topic is economic development.
Oh, sure.
We have the perfect opportunity out here, 65 corridor. That's a progress, that's a work in progress out there. The new housing development, I think, is a bonus. So that's pretty much it.
Oh, perfect. On you next.
Well, I think transportation is an issue because the town is split with a railroad a block away from here. So any development to the south of us is going to be limited because you can only get so many cars going across that track at any one time. And that's a real head scratcher for me because I don't know how you overcome that unless you relocate the tracks or you put an overpass in or something like that. That's a pretty major thing. But if there's going to ever be any real development south of here, it has to happen. Something's going to have to happen because this is the only road where you can get across to the south side of town. Housing, so Dayton's basically pretty much a bedroom community of Lafayette.
Yep.
A lot of people want to move here because we have a small town atmosphere. It is a great place. The kids can ride on the streets here and not have to worry about getting run over. So I think that's a big one. And again, the economic development is, we do have an increase in population. They're going to want, people are going to want things to do. Maybe to stay here in town. Of course, you can run down the street and be in Lafayette in a minute too. But the economic development on 65, or right off the interstate here, well, we're pretty limited right now. Did you know that there was a comprehensive plan for this town 20 years ago?
No, I knew that there was, well, but it had to be one at some point in time, but not one that was current by any means. So that is somewhere we can see what the differences are
We
in
can
that
get-
here.
You could see what the plan was back then, and things have happened that have not allowed that to happen.
Ready to roll?
Mine's under government fiscal, obviously.
Mhm. Makes sense.
Talked about, you know, we've had the same size police department for probably 20 years here. And as we turn the page and start growing with development south and western economic development on the west side of town, we need to look at start entering the thought process to adding another officer at least.
No, we actually just had, planning we've done somewhat read the Sellersburg. I think someone was talking about that. That was actually in theirs because they had for, I think, 4,000 people, 2 officers. So, kind of need to, a little more
They
of
were very
that.
stressed.
Yeah, very stressed, so.
And we're at 2.5, that's where we're at right now.
Perfect. Nothing on you?
I'll say, like what Cindy was saying, I've got placemaking, parks, recreation, economic development. Pretty much. Like to get our face so we don't look goofy. There's been so much stupidity here, and the political process is going on between the last board and this board, this stuff and that stuff and all this, and people in Lafayette are going, look at Dayton's in the paper again, or they're on the news again, what kind of stupid shit's going on up there? Pardon the language of it. You know, I mean, I hear it all the time. I worked in Lafayette. Where do you live? Well, I live in Dayton. Well, what do you think about that housing district? Well, I think it's a pretty good idea. You know, if it helps the median home values of Dayton go up, that's great, because I own my own house too. You know, it helps me in that. I live out there, and the houses are out there. You know, I can't see them. They look like pretty nice houses. They're not something that I'm interested in, because they're too close together, and, you know, it's not my style. But, you know, that's one of the big things we need to work on, I think, is losing out on the goofy campers.
Yeah.
You know, parks and recreation, like she said, we don't have a community park. You know, that'd be nice. I'd see the challenges of that, or where's the property come from, you know, the trails. Be nice to have some walking trails, be nice to have trails we could ride our golf carts up to the gas station or whatever, you know, but because there's no way to get there.
Yeah.
You know, that would be nice, but, you know, economic development, restaurants, it'd be nice to have some other restaurants here, there's more choices, you know. If I didn't need to go in town to work, I wouldn't go in.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah,
I like it.
that was one of the surprising things on our end about the document, like just the sheer amount of like residential versus commercial in the town limits and everything. We understand, you know, the close proximity to Lafayette, but it's still amazing. I'm lazy. I don't want to drive a half hour to just go like eat somewhere or even just like go shopping and everything. I like walking places to go. So that's something I know we thought was surprising about Dayton is the imbalance of commercial and residential, which all is going to be looked at in the land use plan.
I think something else you kind of brought up that actually when we came into the interview was one of the things that we spoke on is, you know, if you look up Dayton, whatever comes up on Google comes up, but from outside perspectives, you know, we're not involved in things that have happened in the past or anything kind of political like that. We, you know, at the end of the day are just, you know, a group that's coming in, kind of understanding what the community needs, and then impartially being able to sit down and write down what, you know, what that future might be. So I think that is something nice, you know, kind of having that outside perspective, being like, well, I don't really care what's happened, you know, the past 10, 20 years or whatever, you know, what are we going to do now? Like, what's tomorrow going to be? Like, what's next year going to be? So,
It's much better, I like it here. I don't wanna live anywhere else but here.
good to
Yeah,
hear.
so you live here for a reason, you work here for a reason, you want to just, you know, widen that so more people have those same thoughts.
Here since 97, I can't remember. I was a little over.
Well, I'm an outsider, but from what I see, I think that the big challenge is to, Dayton is distinctly different than just another Lafayette neighborhood, you know, and I think that difference is a very good thing, and it's what makes it distinct and unique, and I think the challenge is to balance that small town, sort of literally distinctly Dayton characteristic versus housing pressures which are gonna come because we can't build houses anywhere else. Commercial pressures from the interstate. It's great that it's close, but you don't want to be overwhelmed by that off-ramp and development characteristic. So I think that just being able to balance the things that are good about Dayton without letting it be overrun by these incoming pressures is a big deal.
Sure. Makes sense. Mike,
Yes.
you're up.
Yes, okay.
Your time to shine.
Well, the three I chose, land use, housing, and parks and recreation. Land use, the vacant land that we have around here, Hills Drive area, east on Walnut Street. Room for needed items, retail, so forth. Housing, more places for more people to live, perhaps, multi-unit housing, perhaps assisted living. Those are perhaps things we should look at. Parks and recreation. Currently, again, we have the school, and that's about it. Now, for several years, the Dayton Mothers Club rented for $1 a year the grassy hillside down at Walnut Street, bordered on the parking lot for the Sun Temple. And there were playground equipment, shelter house, and a little government platform in there for restroom. And that went on for a while, but it got to where they couldn't afford to keep it mowed. And gave it up back to the Krause estate. And I'm not sure who owns it now. Keep a little bit of that. Now, some things that were said just a little while ago, Sam said, about not wanting to walk anywhere. I moved to Dayton in 1960. I was 12 years old. I've seen a lot of things that were here and aren't here anymore. And forgive me, I made a little list. Things that were here that I miss. A drugstore. That'd be nice. The lumber yard. Ever need a piece of glass or some nuts and bolts or nails? I got it there. Doctor's office. Nice to walk out of your doctor's office, walk down to the pharmacy. Barber shops. There were at least 2 all the time. We had a funeral home for generations here. Since about 1847, around there. High school. I'm the youngest living graduate of Dayton High School. I'm the president of the Alumni Association. But, and we had a great plumbing, heating, air conditioning, electrical repair. The Ocean Sons, the sign's still up, the business isn't there anymore. And had a car wash for a while. It was kind of nice. Things I do not miss, I didn't use the pool a whole much. Or had no use for the grain elevator. But, things that might fit in, assisted living facility, multi-unit housing, airstrip. That's all I have.
A lot of cargo planes coming in. Ron, you
All right.
got things?
I have the land use, housing, and parks and recreation. I think a lot of it's just tied with what I'm concerned about is Dayton, because it's bordered by the interstate, by the Wyandotte back here and Haggerty up here. We only have, I think, 200 acres left over here, 30 acres north of the housing, Davy Road, and then south of town, we probably have 400 acres. So we don't have thousands and thousands of acres like a lot of these communities have. So when we plan whatever it is, what it looks to me like is the big, we need to be playing for ourselves and our residents and not for the outside developers and everything. And our 200 acres up here by the interstate is being overrun. It's almost being wiped out. It's going to be all warehouses because we have a county commissioner that absolutely wants that as an avenue of nothing but warehouses. He's told me that. He says that's what they needs. And when you talk about people in Lafayette talking, I think they do talk about us. But then the reason we have, why we're arguing a lot out here, is because the interests of Lafayette and of the county are also telling us some things to do with our area that we don't like to do. And I think 90% of the people in this town don't want warehouses at all along the interstate. But you've got two farms that own everything, and the one whole farm's going to be warehouses, the other one, and the county keeps pushing, you're going to have to drive an avenue of warehouses. It's all going to be warehouses. So that leaves a housing area back here with, like Mark said, the railroad tracks. But already the old director of area plans, Sally Bay, was real concerned about those railroad tracks. And they had a 30-year comprehensive plan that had all these areas planned with retail shops and things for the residents and not for the outside forces. But we're being directed, the main thing is by the outside builders and the outside forces. And down here, housing is great, but you just don't need to stack them on top of one another. Make them look good, have their own green spaces and trails in them, so that Dayton doesn't have to provide for those. One builder alone's going to build 550 houses down here and wipe out half the land that's south of us. So that only leaves another 400 acres, 300 acres to do something nice with. And already the other developers in Indianapolis and all around are hitting us up to put nothing but housing on top of one another from 3 to 6 foot lot lines. So I think everybody's ideas are good, but you got to remember, you better start talking to these out-of-town people, because in the next 2-3 years, we won't have any land to really plant. There'll be all warehouses and all houses on top of one another, and you won't have the restaurants, the barber shops, you won't have any of the stuff that's really good for this community and for the residents that live here. That I think the survey last year said 74 or 78% want more restaurants. They want 3 or 4 more restaurants. Where are you going to put those restaurants? You're not going to put them up by the interstate. That's all gone. You're not going to put them down here. That will be all housing, like on the west side out by Harrison High School, where now the residents are complaining. The residents have bought the houses in the last 5-8 years, have formed their own organization, and are complaining and trying to keep out more housing from their area because they're so overpacked in there. So I think our big concern is the land use, first of all, so that we can direct what we want to have, or we want parks, or we want housing, or we want residential shops, or whatever. But I'm going to tell you, this town of Dayton is its own entity, and Lafayette and those county commissioners are telling us what to do with our land because of that SIA plan, that they're going to ruin Dayton. They're not, nobody here is going to ruin it. It's going to be them that are going to ruin it in the future. So we better be talking and really tell them what we want. So I'm glad we're doing this. That's all.
Yeah, and this plan is also like, think of it as kind of not a stake flag in the ground, but more so like we have our own opinions, like we have our own vision and everything. Like we have our seat at the table and everything. We are our own community. Here's all the topics that we're looking at, so that we can have a more organized effort to have a more productive conversation, per se.
I hope they listen to us. I don't think they listen.
Sorry, not least.
Okay, agree, we're placemaking land use and parks and recreation. So placemaking, like Cindy said, we've started doing some town events, like a Santa one and a 4th of July one, and we're doing the pumpkin patch. So I would love to see more people getting on board with the actual planning and implementation of those things, because I think a lot of people enjoy it, but I don't have a whole lot of people like involved in doing those things. And I just want people to say, like, so you hear a lot of people say, I moved to Dayton because it's a small town, I just love that small town atmosphere. So you don't hear people saying, I moved to Dayton because I just really love the high water bill. Love paying so much for my water. People don't say that. They say they love the small town atmosphere. I think we need to keep that. And to what Dale was saying, I want people to say and be proud to say, I'm from Dayton. Not just like I'm from Dayton, but I belong in Dayton. And, you know, next year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, when they're super old, I want people to have, like, think back on the things in Dayton and not just like, well, I lived there, but I went to Lafayette for everything. Like, I went to Lafayette to their parades, and I went to Lafayette to grocery shop, and I went to, like, I want Dayton to be, like, just a good, happy core memory of, like, that was not just their life, but you know what I mean? Like, that was their hometown, and that is where they came from, and they're, like, proud of that. It feels good to be from there. The second one was land use, which I think everybody realizes that our biggest challenge is that we're running out of land, and so we need to be very careful with how that land is used, because we don't have a whole lot of it. And then parks and recreation, just like everybody else said, we need more parks, not necessarily just playgrounds, but like, what about basketball hoops or like tennis courts or pickleball courts? I don't know if that's the same thing, maybe it is. Or even just, walking trails, or like Dale said, a trail to get the golf carts up to that part of town. Because right now you could go to like the gas stations and Dollar General, but eventually, hopefully, there's going to be other really lovely neighborhood businesses up there that they can access on their golf carts, which would be really nice. I don't know where that would go. That's a challenge, but it would be nice.
Are golf carts able to be driven?
Yes, but the problem is State Road 38, like, they can't drive them down. Like, they could cross State Road 38, but you can't just drive down State Road 38. So it would have to go, like, by the railroad tracks in people's backyards, or I don't know. Those are my main things.
All right, perfect. So we kind of have these eight kind of big topics up here on kind of our board, and you know, these are kind of the ones that maybe were a little more common. Seeing plenty of land use is always big. Everyone always talks about economic development. That's, you know, the driver. So kind of now we've kind of heard your all's kind of top three or top one, and your reasoning behind it, kind of the big thoughts. Now I'm going to try to ask, okay, we have these 8 up here. If you pick, you know, 1 or 2 of them and kind of write a big idea for that one. So I know you talk about maybe like placemaking for, you know, the branding and for that, or, you know, we need like the community department, things like that. I want you to kind of choose, you know, another 1 or 2 and kind of write a big idea, you know, whether it be transportation, you know, walking paths or whatever like that. Just like a little bit of different perspective on maybe what you think that topic would be, or like what's important for that topic for you. And I'll come around and I'll pick up the sticky notes. No one has to get up, and I'll kind of sit up and kind of talk about like those different ideas.
And don't think about budget. Don't think about, you know, like, oh, this would never happen in Dayton. Like, don't limit yourself to that. Try to, like, this is exploratory.
If you want to write, I'll take
Because
one. I'll forget to.
This plan is not just, you know, things that are looking at for the next 2 years. We're trying to really make the vision for Dayton over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Land use,
Like we figured out 3 years ago. No one knew a pandemic was
and
going
then
to happen.
economic
We didn't, like, that
development and
literally turned the world upside down and everything. So like some businesses
So
had
there's
to
like
completely rework
whether
how they do
something that maybe you
things. So
didn't kind of write
that's
about
not
here,
something they
it's
could
like
forecast.
housing's a big one or something.
So
It's kind of
don't
that
limit yourself
big
on
idea we
things that
can
you.
move the counties for housing.
I don't think this would ever happen in Dayton. I want to know those schools.
No, that's
Big
good. Big ideas are always.
Like say, like I myself, I'm a rock climber. I think it would be cool if you guys had an outdoor rock climbing thing. My parents live just north in the country area of just north of West Lafayette and everything. So I actually So like I
Lot
think
of
it'd be
mountains
really
here
cool
in
if you guys
Dayton.
had an outdoor like rock field and everything for me to, you know, climb and everything like that safely. But like that'd be a cool park for me.
Sam, I apologize, I got distracted with technology here, and what exactly is our assignment here?
So we're just having, you kind of have like your big three that you kind of your ideas on.
Big idea.
So we're having, if you find like one or two up there that you didn't kind of write anything about, like a big idea of what you think for that one. So
Okay.
if you didn't write about like transportation,
Or
whatever,
also
is there something
if,
for transportation that you think?
You may have identified.
Just kind of getting more
an issue,
ideas, making
and
everyone think a
maybe
little more.
solution to it.
And then I'll pick up the sticky notes and I can put them up there.
Pick one of these.
Pick one of those. You say you pick one we didn't pick before?
Yeah, just trying to hear
No.
what your thoughts are on the other ones. I know everyone's got ideas on stuff. Force them out of you.
So like if you said your top three were Parks and Rec, historic, and placemaking, what's your idea about facilities and services?
These will be kind of similar to what, you know, our public meeting coming up, or what we'll kind of ask from everyone else too that shows up. So we'll kind of have a big board for, you know, what are your no financial holdbacks, you know, we can do anything you want, like, what are those big ideas you'd love to see in the town? Because you hear people, you know, say like, I want a full-size water park in town, or, you know, I want like a Target to come in and things like that. And then we'll kind of focus it down and be like, okay, well, you know, where on this map, if you could put a Target in town, like, where would you put it in town? Like, where would you put new housing? Where would you put, you know, a new coffee shop? So we're kind of getting down to these kind of questions that we'll be asking from everyone here later on, but we'll kind of get first dibs on the assignment.
There's no wrong answer. Awesome.
There's a lot of right answers.
We got time. You have all next couple months to give us the right answers.
And we kind of highlighted it back in the process stage. Some things are a high priority, like this is something that the town needs to address, you know, in the next 5 years and everything, like getting another officer. That's a public safety kind of thing. But there may be things that, you know, oh, like 10 years down the road, more like low priority, long term. You know, this would be like a good forethought kind of thing. So it's just immediate things, high priority stuff. That's also why this is not a legal binding document, because those priorities can change, as well as, you know, a new funding source can come out that is targeted towards one of your low priorities, and all of a sudden that becomes high priority because we're going after this funding source. So this is a very flexible kind of document.
I'll say one, you know, that we've heard that kind of fits in economic development and placemaking recently is daycare. A lot of communities, you know, they have two parents that they both want to get back into working, but, you know, either because of COVID or just because it's so expensive, they can't afford the daycare bill. It's cheaper to have someone stay home with the kids than it is to send them off. So that's been something that, you know, we've been, and a lot of different plans we've been talking about, because it's just, and personal, yes. Daycare's not cheap. All right. Well, as you finish up, I will come around and pick up your sticky notes. We're done. I'll stick them on. Big writer over here.
We like, that's what we like. Yeah, we want all of
No,
those.
you're good. No, you're fine. I'll put them all up.
I am an unbiased springboard. Lay it on me.
Sharp. Look at you.
You moved that in 1960?
What?
60?
1960.
You were 73.
Couple years before.
I was 12.
I said my parents were born in 63 and 64.
I've heard the story often about the railroad bringing population to Dayton. Wyandotte, I think, was a little bigger before my time. Yes.
Well, this was the improved, there was a toll road at one time, wasn't it? It was one of the most improved roads in the state because they had walls across it. Travel.
Corduroy Road.
And down at 900, that little building that was down there was a toll road.
That's right, that one.
They magically disappeared. The fairies took it.
All right. So kind of the road, is the railroad super active then, if it's like that big of a, okay. I'm, from, my parents live in a town called Granger, Indiana, it's kind of up east of South Bend, Mishawaka, basically just a massive group of suburbs. But there is a line that's like one of the Canadian lines that goes up through Michigan and back down, right smack dab middle of town, that I bet it's 15 to 30 trains a day, depending on like how busy they are. And so you hit it at the wrong time, and it's like a half mile backup for 10,000 people trying to get through on the one road during the day. So it's definitely doable. I mean, if you have the right, they're just redoing it right now because it's like 4-lane getting through. But right, if it's thin and it's not good going over, and you have people slowing down a lot to go over, then it's no fun. All right, so I had a little stick. I'll just quickly read through them here. Finish a little early-ish and get going. All right, so who's this one is? Sold off her desk. Under housing, assisted living. So we kind of have that again on here.
Do you want me to expand on why I didn't
Yeah,
really
you can.
recognize it? So my thinking was, even if we don't have a whole bunch of people in Dayton right now that could benefit from that, we have a lot of people in Dayton who probably are related to or love people that could benefit from that. And in my mind, maybe this is all just make-believe, but if there was some sort of assisted living or senior living place, like, it would benefit the town, like, bring in jobs, and maybe people could be close to their loved ones, which benefit their loved ones, benefit them that they don't have to drive somewhere to get them, but just the community as a whole. Like, if there were programs in place to make them a part of the community, like maybe the assisted living or the senior living center was very close to like a community park where all ages could go, and like you have younger ones going on walks or playing checkers or whatever with these older generations, and just I don't see how it couldn't benefit everybody in that relationship. And I don't know, just having them in a community that could make them a part of that community.
Yeah.
It's been
Sounds
a big deal
like a
in Mulberry.
Yeah, and if you think
How
about,
many Dayton people I've known that have ended up going to Mulberry?
if you think about that population pyramid, you didn't really have a higher senior. Well, you got to think, are the facilities in place in Dayton right now to support an older generation, like housing or different services or things like that? There's a reason why there's not a higher senior. And why is that? That's one of the things that we're trying to figure out and try to get. So we don't want people to leave Dayton once they get into like different parts of their life. We want them to, like, if you grew up here and then you worked here, but then I'm a senior citizen, I can't. All my kids have moved away. I can't take care of a lawn myself. Well, I need to move. So it's just trying to figure out like, why don't you have a certain population, or why you do have a certain population?
All right. So for placemaking, we also kind of heard of like cultivate like a district. So kind of like a town center, kind of vibrant. So maybe that means next to town hall here, and have a gazebo in the park. What's the way of thinking about? Okay, maybe we put in those lights down the street so people can go there, or maybe we can make like more of a festival area, something like that central gathering place. Also, like large tasteful signage, kind of like that landscaping, masonry. So maybe we start talking about, is there need to kind of design up a new like town entry sign? So when big monument, well, I'll say big like monument signs, you have the flowers in front, nice landscaping around it. So I'm driving on 38 here, I'm coming from the other side of West Lafayette, and all of a sudden, oh man, like, welcome to Dayton. Like there it is, and not just a small, 1-by-1 sign on the highway.
I know I
got transportation, building bridge over railroad track, four-way stop at Dayton Road and 38. Which intersection is it, right here? Okay, that's good to mark down. Bridge. Okay, footbridge. I'm guessing it's not footbridge, a bridge over off of South Street. Okay, so talk about kind of that
We have a railroad bridge.
railroad bridge over here.
Walk.
Okay, is that still?
It used to be a drive over till probably about 1978 or so.
So a crane ripped it. A
Yeah.
boom on a crane went along and ripped it down.
Ah.
They rebuilt it. There's a walking bridge.
Is that connecting different parts of the town?
So South Street and Shady
Oh,
Lane.
railroad track.
Oh, well.
Well, I mean, you
Well,
gotta get a
there's something
railroad,
else.
when this is blocked, you gotta move, the only way across to that whole south end is across that footbridge. That's why it's so important about that railroad and all that housing down there.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, it's good to know because we've seen a lot of like, well, it's an active rail, but you know, a lot of trails run around railways. Like by my grandparents' house, one of them, a statewide trail is connected. I mean, things doing over so sorry pedestrian bridges, and all of a sudden the rail do a little bit less later on. I can put a trail next to that and bring people in. So also good. So we talk about housing, so not for future development, maybe not just that traditional R1, R2, single two-story home and things. And you're talking about more outside the box, different kind of planned development. So, you know, here I think, you know, you have like your ranch next to two-story, next to, you know, maybe smaller patio type home. Then you got a park in that neighborhood, and so it's not just like you said, house, 2-foot yard, house,
Not just
yard
go around
house.
houses.
Yep, yep.
All the same.
Okay, housing incentives and grants for homeowners and landlord remodel, that's definitely something we hear a lot about. So, I mean, there are a ton of grants out there that are both local, like small communities do, and even state things for, you know, I want to do a facelift on my businesses on the main street, or, you know, I have this older historic home that I'd really like to even still live here, but, man, those old homes are expensive if, you know, I gotta redo everything inside of it. Like about the senior living. So economic development, we got purchasing old car wash property, getting shovel ready for like a dogs and sons. That's fun. Like those.
I don't know who said that, but yum.
Yeah.
Anything good? I mean,
That takes extra police to direct the traffic there. All of a sudden, when they were
so
That's
facilities and
development size is where the
services.
customer-
Lot for these ones. So as the town grows, you know, need for more public personnel, kind of snow removal, police, street maintenance. Like if we have all these big ideas, we put the senior housing in, and big park, like someone's got to be there to shovel all this new stuff. So no, always important to have in
I
there.
won't be here forever.
Keep the county out of our business. So kind of finding the, well, no, I mean, it's, you know, making sure
I
that,
just wonder who said that.
Yeah, really.
well, you know, as these plans, like there are by the community for the community. So kind of the whole point is we want to make sure that the residents' ideas are accounted for and that we're planning for them, not for, you know, a developer down in Indianapolis. Facilities and service, you know, getting town hall and post office off of state highways, maybe a little safety or reasons there. Kind of a community center, wedding venue, or kind of event venue. I know some police have like a Lions Club kind of takes the place of that, but if you don't have one and I want to have my kid's 16th birthday party or reception, you know, where am I going to go? So definitely good there. Final for land use, bringing retail to the town. It's bank. Retail to the town bank. Some more retail, but I definitely think, you know, when we're in the plan along those lines, it's, you know, you have opportunities along 38 here. You know, I know it is state road and all that, but, you know, when there are those anti-commercial buildings in the city, or there's a space or two that, you know, how can we bring in the different retail that everyone wants, and kind of have its place and make sure there's not kind of imposing on what's already there. Well, okay, no, perfect. This, you know, these kind of exercises are not only great for us to hearing things, but, you know, it's nice for, I think, everyone in the room kind of gets an idea of what everyone else is thinking too, because, you know, we're going to be kind of working on this for the next couple of months with each other, so that's kind of nice as well. And then, you know, hearing from the public and maybe how their ideas might be the same, or maybe they'll be different, and maybe they'll think that they love houses with 1-foot side yards for some reason, and they really like that fire hazard that brings, so you never know. So, coming up, we have a couple things in the works. So, we put October 20 for your email, but we can kind of chat about, that would work. But kind of our next thing is going to be this first public workshop. So I know we talked about at the festival coming up here, 23rd.
Well, it was the 24th, we actually had to change it, so it's now Sunday, the 25th. Yeah.
Well, we can think about that, but if not, at least definitely in October, we want to maybe have a place and time for kind of that first big community meeting. That will be, we'll kind of have big boards up. We like to say that it's not public coming and sitting down and me up here speaking. It's one of those where we have different boards and activities, and people can come and go as they please and walk around and read what we got and can give their input, and we'll have sticky notes and dots, so kind of make it more interactive, so it's not just them listening to me up here talking all at once. So.
Yeah, and while we personally will be there for the entire time, which tends to be about 2 to 3 hours, we think of it more as like if you have 5 minutes out of your day, if you have 15 minutes, or if you want to come and hang out with me for the next 3 hours, you are welcome to. I will take the conversation, but we're just trying to get people that they have their busy schedules, they have kids, they have their own work, their own life, different shifts and everything for second, third shift, but we still want to be able to capture all of their ideas, so we're framing it as quick stop by exercises you can do in 5 to 15 minutes.
And then, so kind of after that, also that we'll launch a online survey too. So that'll be kind of a little survey monkey thing. It'll be similar questions at the meeting, and I can shoot over like a URL and a QR code you want to put up on like the town's website or social media. I can make a little thing. We'll make like little handouts that we can
Little flyers.
pass around for like anyone that's not at the meeting. If they want to give input, we want to try to get everyone involved as we can, because it's important to hear back from anyone and everyone. Kind of after that, we'll have our second kind of steering committee. So this will be, we'll kind of take a look at everything that we've heard from the online survey, the vote meeting, and kind of start making that big vision statement and those goals and kind of fleshing through that. So we can kind of work, but I put up here like what date kind of works best. So it'll be maybe end of October-ish or somewhere in there that we'll probably have another meeting such as this, and I can put out a doodle poll, or we can just say October 15th or whatever date, let's just kind of plan on that. So, I don't know, you and I can maybe chat about what that is, or if there is, we can kind of reach out. I can put a blast email and whatever people sends back, but that will definitely kind of be coming up here in another, month and a half or so for that second meeting.
But initially evenings.
Yeah, I think evenings. Sometimes we'll have them in, at noon or like around lunchtime, because people kind of get up and hop over. But if the evenings work for everyone here, then that works for us. We can keep having them at this time.
I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but.
Or in the morning. We've had one meeting where they started at 8 a.m. and went from like 8 to 10. So whatever works best. This time works best. We keep doing it. But if any of you have kind of thoughts on that, just shoot myself or Sam or anyone an email.
Days of the week have a lot to do with it. Like the first Tuesday's the only Tuesday I'm free in the evening. Wednesdays I'm free.
Well, if Tuesdays work for people, we can keep them on Tuesdays going forward.
Well, if it's the
Just
first
nice,
Tuesday, I can make it any other Tuesday. Sorry.
Busy man. Well, we can figure, me and Jim will talk about that, kind of figure out what day works. But so kind of for our homework here, kind of the next is just for that public meetings coming out, Sam will kind of make up a little flyer and we'll send out, we can post it on that, but kind of we just want everyone here to just invite everyone you can. Like once we got that date hammered down in that location, if it's your neighbors, co-workers, friends, family, whoever it may be, invite them out, because we'd like to hear from everyone, to get them to stop by, so.
And I wonder if the public workshop, if it can't happen at the pumpkin patch, which I think a lot of people would be at, I wonder if there's another location that it could happen at that's more neutral, because town hall should be very neutral, this is everybody's town hall, but perhaps people would
I'd
feel like they're
neutral,
coming.
Neutral places, we've had them in schools, we've had them in churches, we've had them at outside of, I did one outside of a high ice cream
Oh, yeah.
drive-through. Yeah, I was sweating my butt off in that picture.
Yeah.
So we've had them in a lot of places because we can get up and go and carry things. I don't got to lug around this with me. So if there's another location that more neutral or whatever it might be that works for everyone, we can definitely do it there.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and while we tend to see more success if it's tacked onto something, if we can't find like events or anything like that, we can just do like a separate
mhm.
kind of thing.
I will
But-
say too, smaller communities usually have better turnout. I'll say because so you're more friendly with your neighbors, but people talk more. So maybe like in Indianapolis, you could have a big neighborhood meeting and you might have these amount of people show up, but I guarantee you 95% of people in the neighborhood probably didn't hear about it. Where small towns, you chat more, you come
Yeah.
get your mail, things like that. So
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I had a small town of about like, I want to say it was a little over 300 people. There was one person who came, saw the people here, turned around, and just started walking down the street and just yelling. Wasn't yelling, he was boisterous with his voice, saying, come down to the community park, we're having a public meeting, and he pretty much went door to door and everything. It's not what we're asking you guys to do, but when it comes to just kind of like championing the event and spreading the word, we don't need a blowhorn or anything like that, but just
But if we had one.
if you have one, I'll say no. All right, well, any other questions? Well, we've kind of gone over tonight, process, next meetings, anything like that? No? Well, once again, we just want to say thank you so much for coming out and being part of this. I think once we get into it by the end that, this plan will, at the end of the day, be what the Dayton community wants. It's, kind of our job to sit back and take everything that we've heard here today, and hopefully here in the future, and, start planning for Dayton's future. So I'm excited.
Hey.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.